Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we have the very cool, very popular AD-15 from Cold Steel. This, of course, is a production version of the Ergonomics AD-15 custom knife, and I guess there's also sort of a mid-tech-ish version of that as well. So very, very cool knife, fantastic design. I absolutely love the overall aesthetics of this knife. I really do. I love the way it looks. I love the design. I love the patterning in the G10. The Scorpion lock, I think, is really, really fantastically cool while still being highly functional. So there's a lot of things that really attract me to this knife. And I'd love to hear in the comments down below what kind of things draw you to this knife. If you own one of these, if you were one of the ones who bought one right away or have been able to get one subsequent to their initial release, which granted, if you did that, you deserve a pat on the back. They've been really hard to come by. But what was the primary motivation behind picking up this knife? For me, it's 100% design. I love the design of this knife. I love the look of it. And yeah, there are some other things going on here that I enjoy, the size, the blade shape, things like that. But to me, primarily, it's the novelty of this really, really cool yet really functional lock that, anyway, yeah. So it's primarily about sort of the geek factor on this knife for me. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this, and we'll talk about all the different features as we go through here. But the first thing I want to point out is that this is a pretty large knife. All right, so we've got 8 5/8 inches overall, 3 11/16 on the blade. So just a hair, in fact, it's a little over that. So it's really just a hair under 3 3/4 in blade length. When you close the handle here, you get 5 3/16. Now, one odd thing here that may put some people off is the fact that the blade tang comes out here and extends past the handle. So if you only measure to here, you're going to basically subtract 1/4 inch from that measurement. Although, right, there's no reason to care about that because that's how big it really is. All right, in terms of grip area, what we've got going on here is just a hair under 3 3/4 inches. So even if you've got pretty big hands, this knife is going to fit you just fine. I might add that that's of course measuring in between here. So I haven't really included the choil in that discussion. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to ergonomics. Let me try and flip the knife over and let you take a look at the non-show side, although it's going to be a little glary while we're doing that. So that's the size and weight. Oh yeah, the overall weight here is 6.5 ounces, which is a little hefty. But again, this sort of puts me in mind, I remember commenting on the AD-10 that it really doesn't feel as heavy as it is. And that's kind of true of this knife as well. It's a little more noticeable in hand and in pocket. And that's one of the things when I talk about this. So when you carry this knife, one of the drawbacks is it's a more squared off knife. So the AD-10, everything is smooth, everything is rounded, and that means when you put it in your pocket, you don't notice it all that much. Now on this guy, the corners are a little more squared off, the texturing is a little more aggressive, and so in pocket, this is a little more noticeable. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of the SR1. So if you've had an SR1 or if you know what that feels like in pocket, you know it can be a little bulky, and this guy can feel a little hefty in pocket as well. Not unduly so. I've carried this plenty and it doesn't put me off from carrying it, but I could see how it might put some people off. All right, moving on here to the very first thing we care about, and that is the blade. I really, really like this blade. Now, I know when I talked about the AD-10, I talked about the fact that I like hollow grinds, and I do. This flat grind, though, I will say I was a little concerned that it wouldn't cut as well as, I wanted it to, but it cuts very, very nicely. And, let me say this about Cold Steel and about Ergonomics as well. Even in their most stocky, robust, thick, heavy-duty folders, I have never yet seen a Cold Steel blade that doesn't cut really, really well. Now that's in folders. I haven't tried a lot of their fixed blades, so that could be a totally different ball game. I don't know. But in terms of Cold Steel folders, I've never had one that didn't cut. And so and that's one of the things that draws me to them as a company. If you like heavy duty knives, but you still want it to cut stuff really well, Cold Steel becomes pretty compelling because their blades are so well balanced and consistently so. By the way, I also love the grinder satin, the dual direction here, top swedge. Overall, this is just a fantastic blade. Once again, this is something I'll talk about a lot. If you look at the way that this is ground here, notice how this particular grind brings a lot of material. Hold on, there we go. Out to the tip, making it nice and thick and strong, and again, very confidence inspiring. So now that we've got the blade out of the way, and I think the blade is a huge win, we've got to move on to the lock. Now, if you've had a custom version of this, you'll notice right away that the spring tension is a little higher for whatever reason, whether it's the springs that Cold Steel sourced or whether it was a purposeful choice where, you know, because of the larger numbers they were anticipating having these, they wanted to stiffen up that spring a little bit. Whatever the case may be, it is a little bit stiffer and therefore doesn't, I mean, it's still, you know, it still pretty easily opens and closes. As you can see, I messed it up there because I'm on camera, but it still works very well. But it is definitely not quite as comfortable as the custom version of the knife. Just for those of you who don't know, the way this works is there's a pivot right here, and as you pull up this locking bar, it compresses a coil spring back here that's hidden inside the handle. All right, so that's the way that functions. There's a coil spring that's sitting against this lanyard hole and pushing up on this, and so that when you lift up here, you're compressing the coil spring and then allowed to close the blade. Another neat feature of this is, much like a frame lock, when you close your hand on the knife, you're engaging that lock even further. So it's going to be a little more solid, a little firmer when you have a hand on it. As others have pointed out, that's kind of like a frame lock. So do I like this locking mechanism? Yes, I do. This is one of my favorite features about the knife. Now, I know some people have talked about it being, you know, a little gimmicky, but honestly, I don't find it that way at all. I just think it's a really interesting variation of the back lock or the strap lock. It's one that works very well, and one that I think is great because it adds a design element to the knife. So especially in the customs where this is titanium, but even with aluminum, you can anodize aluminum. It opens up the possibility to put a bunch of different color variations back here. And of course, in the customs, you'll see like damascene steel and all kinds of different anodization colors and all kinds of different options, which I think is really, really cool. I'd also suspect, guys, and maybe I'm totally out to lunch here, but Cold Steel has definitely had a trend over the last few years of offering some different scales and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if in a year's time or so we began to see some different versions of the 8015, which would be very welcome. I think I don't hate the green, but it maybe wouldn't be my first pick if there was, say, blue and orange and black and a few other colors available. I think that would be a great option for people who love this knife and just want something a little different. That's completely aside, but the lock works really, really well. It's really reliable. It's really easy, at least as far as, I mean, I've handed this to a few people and people seem to really quickly go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I see how it works. One thing I will say is this is riding on phosphor bronze washers, which is totally fine. I mean, wow. It's riding on a combination of phosphor bronze washers and Teflon. That's what I meant to say, and that's what I was going through my head as I opened my mouth, but just something totally different came out. So phosphor bronze and Teflon, and it feels very, very good. I didn't take this apart or go crazy cleaning it. I did lubricate it a little bit, but I think the action is quite good on this, and it did take a little bit of time to break in, but it's now very nice. In terms of the actual handle construction, as I already mentioned, we've got aluminum back here for the back strap. We've got stainless steel liners with heavily textured G10, movable clip right there, and then of course Torx bit construction. So not unduly difficult to take apart, I don't find, and you do get that option to move that clip. And then the nice thing about this lock is it's highly ambidextrous. So this really, you know, whichever hand you prefer, this is going to work quite well for you. All right, now I think I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted about the construction and all of that. And I want to comment on what is probably my only real issue with this knife. And that is the fact that it's not as comfortable as the custom or even as a lot of other folders that are out there. The edges are a little squared off. The jimping is a little sharp. Now it's not, look guys, I've used this knife. I've carried it. I wasn't thinking to myself as I was going through my day, oh man, I've got to use my knife. It's so uncomfortable. It's going to hurt my hand. Nothing like that. All right. And I've had knives like that where you're like almost scared to deploy the knife because it's so uncomfortable or because the jimping is so sharp or the detent is so strong. It's not that way at all. All right. It's just not quite as comfortable as I've kind of gotten used to expecting from cold steel. So that's about my only real comment on ergonomics. One of the ways they could remedy that would be to soften this jimping up a little bit and perhaps to give me just a little more space. So when I choke up on this knife, I do love the fact that I can choke up, but my thumb wants to land right about here, which puts me pretty solidly on the top swedge where, of course, it's at the narrowest, so not exactly where you want to have your thumb. All right, so that's my take on the ergonomics of this. Now let me get some comparisons here, and I want to kind of work through a few things as we kind of do these comparisons. So first off, there are just some regular liner lock folders out there that are, they're well done knives, they're fine, and into these sort of, average sort of normal stuff that we're used to seeing, I think here's where the Scorpion lock really stands out because it really is doing something different and interesting rather than, kind of same old, same old. The lock is just there and it's not something I'm going to get too excited about. All right. Now, if you compare it to, of course, some other cold steels, then you bring up the necessary discussion about Scorpion lock versus Triad lock, which one's stronger. And I haven't seen any testing, of course. No one has, because, yeah, anyway, I hope, and Cold Steel, if you're watching this, I would love to see Andrew Demko beat the snot out of this on his testing device that he has there in sort of that knife lab you guys have set up. Sorry, Pete, I'm not disparaging your knife lab either. But I would love to see this go through the overstrikes and all of that spine wax that Cold Steel puts their knives through. I would suspect that it passes since their own admission is they test every knife the same way, but I would be curious about that. All right. In terms of the Triad lock, the big difference is going to be, yeah, this is a lot more fun. All right. Is one way, way better than the other? I wouldn't really say that one is way better, but I would say the Scorpion lock definitely brings the cool factor and takes it up a notch or three. Okay. What else have we got here for compare? Oh, let's bring in another back lock. We haven't seen this knife in a little while. Here we have, of course, a Buck 110. This is the SK Blades exclusive version called the Silver Fox. By the way, anyone watching this, when I was a kid, the Silver Fox was a lure that worked really well for smallmouth, probably largemouth as well. And the odd time it would even, I'd even use it in a pickerel fishing situation. But so that name, when I heard the name of this knife, the Silver Fox, immediately I could picture that spinner bait. Anyway, get that guy out of the way. And let's grab a couple of other sort of non-Cold Steel knives. So Spyderco Amalgam. Big difference here. By the way, look at the Amalgam blade grind. Very well done in terms of getting some strength out to the tip of the blade. And so I've got to say the comparison here I think is very good. The Amalgam's probably going to cut just a teeny bit better. Of course, the big deal is the Amalgam only weighs 4 ounces, which is a huge win as far as I'm concerned. I'm really, really in love with the Amalgam. Not necessarily more so, but I really like both of these knives, and they do very different things for me, okay? The nice thing about this is I get a big knife, a capable knife in a very lightweight package. And of course, many of us are going to be big fans of the Spyderco compression lock, and that is going to provide us that option. Let's pull in a ZT here now. This, of course, is the 0640 Emerson collaboration. I love this. This is a bit of a throwback for ZT. So we have, again, both on washers here, both very capable knives. Obviously, you're paying a fair bit more for the ZT, but you've got 20 CV and a titanium frame-ish thing going on there. But I did want to bring that comparison in as well because, as I've said over and over again, Cold Steel really delivers a heavy-duty knife. They really do. And they, at this point, ZT I don't even associate with being hard use or tactical, but Cold Steel I certainly do. All right, so there we go, guys. Those are the comparisons I've got for you. I hope that was interesting to some of you. Now, let me give you my final conclusion on this knife. This is a fantastic design. I particularly, anyway, find this to be a beautiful, beautiful knife. I love the sort of mechanical look and the visual interest that the Scorpion lock lends to this knife. I love the way this is built. It's an extremely capable folder. And here's what I really, really think I like most about this. In the 8015, you are getting a knife that has tons and tons of cool factor. It's extremely interesting. It's got this great different lock, but in order to get that sort of extra bit of coolness, that really cool mechanical look, you don't sacrifice anything in terms of functionality. This is a highly, highly functional knife. It's a strong lock. It's a great blade. The only place I really took away points here, guys, was ergonomics, and it's still good. It's not as if you're in pain and agony every time you're using this knife. That's not the case at all. It's just not as comfortable as some of the other Cold Steels I have in my collection. Okay, so really, really great knife, and I love that Cold Steel has brought this to market. I think it's one of the coolest things they've done in a number of years, and I can't wait to see what other variations, and that's one thing that really excites me about this knife, is with their permission to use the Scorpion lock, it would be really cool if Cold Steel used this technology and brought us some other knives with some slightly different designs here, still, of course, using that Scorpion lock. I think that would be a really, really exciting thing to see for the 2020 Cold Steel lineup, okay? So there you go, guys. That's my overall take on the 8015. I don't love it quite as much as the 8010, but boy, is it a cool knife. And if you already have an 8010, you already have a bunch of cool Cold Steels, then I think this is worth adding to your collection. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.